Okay, so this is the first in a series of discussions with agents, which is really, really exciting for us. I know this is something that members have wanted for a long time. And we've got WGGB chair and TV writer Lisa Holdsworth talking to her agent, Georgina Ruffhead, who has just recently founded Haworth Agency. So congratulations, Georgina, on that. They're going to be talking about the importance of their professional relationship. And I believe they've worked together for around 20 years. Just to remind you again, this is a WGGB members only event. It's really great to have all of our members here. And yeah, I'll speak to you again at the end. Here we go.
Thanks, Nadine. Welcome to everyone. Lovely to have you all here. I'll make sure that my camera's on. I hope you all can hear me. I'm just going to chat with Georgina. As Nadine said, she's been my agent for nearly 20 years at this point, which is kind of extraordinary. We've never had a crossword. There's marriages that aren't as successful as my relationship with Georgina, but I'm also going to try and ask her the questions that we get asked most commonly about agents. So Georgina, welcome to the Writers Guild offices.
Thank you.
We're in the same office, but in separate rooms to make sure everybody can hear us. So I'm going to start with the question that we usually ask writers, which is, how did you come to be an agent?
Well, I think that most people don't go to their career service at school and say, hey, I want to be a literary agent. And most careers service people don't say to students, do you want to be a literary agent? It doesn't necessarily come up as a direct career choice, but I think a lot of people like me are interested in publishing or media. Generally, I was always interested in writing, and then, you know, I did that typical thing of looking in the Guardian, which was the go-to place at the time, and seeing a literary agent job and thinking, actually, I'd love to do that. At the time, I was looking for more editorial jobs. But I went for a job. I was originally working in translation rights, which I didn't think was the right fit for me, not least as my languages weren't that brilliant. And I got really excited by how the film TV department was working. And then I moved over to be an assistant. I was an assistant for about 3 years, and it was the time I was then working at David Hyam. And they took over another agency, so I was lucky enough to be an enthusiastic person in the right place, and got the opportunity to grow and take on my own clients at that point. And, you know, I just think it's a career that you grow as you go, really. And that's been fantastic for me. So yeah, a bit of accident and a bit of making the most of being, of just realizing that this was the right fit for me when I knew about it.
And those agents you took on when you were at David Hyam, some of them still the clients you took on, some of them still your clients?
Well, yes, there's you. Yes, you mean scriptwriter clients? Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that I've got a lot of very long-term clients that are still with me, and I love that. I mean, you and I, Lisa, obviously were incredibly young when we started working together, and it's been really nice to grow up together. And I've got a lot of clients that I'm in that same situation with, and that we've been through a lot together and guided them through a long-term career.
And so coming back to that, because again, that superhero origin story is what a lot of people like to hear, because it gives them a clue about how to get on with their own agent. I wonder if we have the same memory of how I came to be your client. So I'd written a screenplay when I was at university called Jackie's Wedding, which I'd sent out to every agent that accepted unsolicited material in the back of the Writers and Artists yearbook. I got a lovely thick pile of cards that were rejections, but you had read it and you quite liked it, and you came back to me and said, I'm interested. And then you said, what else have you got? And I think my reply was, oh, heck, it's taken me 3 years to write this. But we kept in touch after that. Is that your memory as well?
It's very much my memory. And I still remember Jackie's Wedding. It was basically about a wedding and using a kind of barter economy to make the wedding happen, which I thought was a really, really fun idea. But I think I felt then, and I feel now, that it's really good for a writer to have a portfolio of different things. You know, maybe ideally more than one script, maybe some treatments or ideas, and really hit the ground running with those. So I didn't, you know, it was just a question of you were fairly young and starting out at that point. And then the next thing I remember, you emailed me, I don't know how long afterwards, and said that Kay Mellor had offered you a commission on Fat Friends, and we started working together from then. That was just the impetus that we needed to get going. And I think we probably sent Jackie's Wedding out as a sample as well, but you then started creating more work that we could then send people, more people got to know you, and I think it all kind of built up quite quickly from there, as I recall, really.
It was sort of, now it felt like it was a long time coming, because between writing Fat Friends, I did a temp job for a while back in the NHS as a secretarial temp, but then after that it all gathered momentum. And the thing that maybe you don't know is basically if Kay's company had offered me 50 pence and a bag of gobstoppers to write that episode, I would have said, okay, that sounds like a fair fee, because at the time I had absolutely no idea what I should be asking in terms of money, but obviously you negotiated me a fair settlement for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we don't expect that people necessarily know what they're doing. So I would always say to anyone, talk to an agent, talk to the Writers Guild, get some advice, especially if it's an original project, but you know, for anything ideally.
A question we get sometimes at the Guild is someone who, like me at that point, at the start of their career, will have got their first commission, but have no agent. Can they come to an agent and say, could you just talk me through this? Can I get a bit of advice before I'm signed up to you? Is that acceptable?
I do get asked that from time to time. I think the problem is generally that as an agent, well, it's not a problem, it's part of the way we work. We want a long-term relationship with writers. We don't want to look after them just on a project. We really, you know, even when I read a project, it's not about the project, it's about who is the writer, what is their potential. I don't read a script and think, is this a great script? So we don't ever represent people formally, or I certainly don't, on a one-off basis. I occasionally give, you know, informal advice, but I just don't, to lack of time. I would probably just generally say, if I was in a position to represent them, maybe they want to talk to the Writers Guild or find someone to represent them, because my worry would be having a cursory look at something rather than looking at it properly might not be the right thing to do.
And just to remind our members that we do offer contract vetting. So if you're unrepresented and someone's asking you to sign something you're not sure about, then you can always come to the Guild and we'll look it over for you.
And don't worry, I tell them that, Lisa, so if I don't take them on.
That's it. So this is the bit, I think one of the big questions that a lot of people will be wondering about. What is it that you are looking for in a client, both in their work and in them as a person, that, you know, you can work with them?
I think the potential is the big word, I suppose. It's just feeling, you know, even if that script is a bit raw, rough around the edges, you just think there's something about it, you know. And the further I go in my career and the busier I get, the more I'm looking for something that just makes me really sit up and stands out and is different than other things in some way. And that I know if it stands out for me, that hopefully I'll send it out and it will stand out for other people too, because there's huge potential particularly in the TV area right now, but it's also very competitive. So you need to grab people's attention, and the newer you are as a writer, the more that, you know, I think almost like a new writer needs to be better than a more experienced writer in some ways, or try to be better, or try to be more original, because they won't get anything by their CV, so it has to come from the work. And that's a very hard thing to ask for someone new, to be better than someone experienced. It really is. But, you know, that's almost like what you want to be aiming for. And yes, I suppose you need to feel that they've got, it's not just one project, that they've got, you know, a portfolio, they've got a range of things that will build up a career. And I do get a gut feeling from meeting people, whether, you know, you can sense how their brain ticks in an interesting way. Are you going to be the right fit for them? Are you going to get on with them? And I would say that's a very personal thing. You know, I might be right for someone and not right for somebody else, and vice versa. You know, you may meet one agent who's not the right fit and another one who isn't, and it's about being in a personal connection with the work is really, really important.
Absolutely.
So that's all very general stuff, I realise.
But I think that's important. It's interesting you talk about originality. I think some new writers feel that like they have to fit in to what's already on screen, but it sounds like you're saying that you've got to have a strong voice from the off, really.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that if you're trying to do something that you've seen, I don't know, a famous writer doing on television, and you think, okay, I'm going to write like them. Well, they'll go to those people for that. You've got to kind of give them something a bit different. And even if they don't produce it, you know, just think, oh, wow, I didn't think of it doing it that way. I mean, I don't mean it has to be wacky or left field or really weird. Just, you know, just like, is there a way, if we were doing police, is there some way that we've never done police, or tell it in a way that's different, or maybe it's just from the voice or the tone, it's not from the idea. You know, those are all ways that you can get things to stand up. But yeah, my advice would generally be just far better to surprise and take a risk.
I think that's really good advice. And here's the next big question that I think a lot of people will want to know. How should a new writer approach you as an agent, or any agent? How's the best way to get in touch with you and start a conversation?
I think it's hopefully easier these days than it was. I mean, you talked about that lovely Old Writers and Artists Yearbook, which I think is still published. But nowadays people have websites, and they are very clear on their websites about exactly how to approach them. I mean, when I was setting up the Haworth agency recently, I thought a lot about that. I mean, my submissions page is a little bit on pause at the moment as I'm starting the agency up, but I'm hoping that'll change. But even so, it's kind of good to go on how to approach and what we're looking for. So different people have different policies. Some people don't consider anyone at all. Some people ask for recommendations. You know, we also talked about this a lot at my previous agency, David Hyam, and you know, the difficulty and the number of approaches you get. And we did used to ask for recommendations, and then we just thought we actually wanted to be a bit more open than that. But how do you do that when you have to manage the workload that you get? So I think it's something that agents are wrestling with, and I've tried to do that certainly on my submissions page. And when that reopens, hopefully in the near future, I hope it's got the balance right and it's clear about how to approach us in a way that means that we're open to people, but the things we're actually asking to read are the things that have made us sit up and listen. So I would say generally people may not be asking for the script straight away. They may be asking for other things on the website and then a script, but that may seem negative to someone applying, but actually it means if someone asks to read your script, that's more of a positive, in a way that's more of a choice that they've made. And I hope if I read a script, then I'm much more and I've chosen to read a script, I'm much more likely to be able to give proper feedback. But whereas if I was reading everyone that wrote to me, I'd probably have to give those old blanket responses that, you know, people used to in the old days with the little cards. And, you know, so I personally would much rather be selective and then give proper responses and feedback.
That's great. Someone's asking the chat that if they've got lots of scripts, should they send them all? But it sounds like you're saying, whoa, Nelly, hang on a minute. Just send it. And,
bit by bit.
Yeah. And about sort of length of script, if you are consciously looking for something to send to an agent, does it have to be a full 90 minutes? Can it be a short film, something like that? Are you interested in reading across a range of lengths and slots?
Yeah, I mean, I generally feel like most of the time my minimum will be 30 pages, 30 minutes. I mean, I wouldn't be hard and fast about that, but I just think I want to see the story develop, and it's quite difficult. So I think short films can be good for people who are considering directors, but I think less, you know, for me, looking at writers, I like to see the story unfold. So I probably would be looking for that calling card script to be 30 pages minimum, and whether it's 30 or 60 or 90 will depend what it is. Is it a TV pilot? Is it a narrative comedy? I think the lines are blurring, but I would think it should, in that sense, I suppose format wise, I would say yes, do look at what is out there and how people make things and do it that way. Your originality should probably come from your voice and your ideas, not from the way you're presenting your work. If that makes
sense. It does feel like, I'm thinking about shows like Ted Lasso and that seem to be comedy, but actually have a really strong narrative element to them. Do you think that's something that people are looking for at the moment? That if you're doing a comedy, it needs to have a strong story backbone to it and an engine?
Yeah, I think that's really changing. I mean, I really like the comedy drama space, and I used to struggle with people rejecting comedy because a comedy drama because either it wasn't comedic enough or it wasn't dramatic enough. And I think that the lines are blown with streamers doing dramas that are half hours and people doing comedy dramas that are an hour and doing comedies with narrative elements. So I think things are definitely changing up, and I suppose the more traditional sitcom that is very standalone and episodic is harder now. So, and also because of the way we watch, that we do binge more and we do like to, even if we're watching it as an event once a week, it's still quite compact in the way we watch. So I think we embrace serial episodes. Having said that, I sometimes find it very refreshing as a viewer to go back and watch something that's more episodic and contained and just enjoy that. So I think for some things you can make a virtue of something that works in a standalone way more.
And so here's the hard question. What's the worst way to approach an agent?
I think the worst way would be just ignore if you've made the effort to have a website and a page and you've tried to be as helpful as possible in terms of what you want people to, how you want them to approach it. People who completely ignore that, are usually not doing themselves any favors. And I suppose if they carpet bomb you with loads of material and just an email that's really, really long and you just can't digest, and it's just like a stream of consciousness you get from some people with so much information. I think there's a lot to be said for short and snappy, letting the work speak for itself, if there is a CV, letting it speak for itself. But that's one thing again I know I and other agents have thought about is if there isn't a CV, can somebody do a kind of statement about themselves that sort of is personal to them, and isn't perhaps a formal CV, to try and be more inclusive.
Do you think it's important for writers, before they're looking for representation, when they're building up to sort of their first professional job, to sort of establish themselves, whether it's through social media, maybe doing some self-staged theatre work or podcasts online, because there are more options now than there was 20 years ago when I first came to you. Are you interested in that kind of stuff, people who've gone out and made their own material?
I think anything where somebody has initiative is a good thing. I mean, I think that as I say, it's very competitive. So someone who is go-getting and has done things for themselves, so you don't have a total standing start as an agent. That's a good thing. I used to go to Edinburgh a lot and look at fringe shows, and that's a kind of way of people showing what they're about. And so I suppose now it might be a podcast. It might be a presence on social media. I think it depends on what's appropriate to them as a writer and as a person.
That's interesting. So we'll come on now to a little bit of the other big question that I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around, which is, so we've sent you our script, you've seen our CV, we've had a meeting, we all get on, and now we're a Georgina Ruffhead client. What are you going to do for us?
Well, I think what I typically do when I take someone on is, because maybe the first meeting I've had might be really general, and sometimes I feel like I've covered what I need to do, but I might actually touch base with them again, either have a second meeting or a call or exchange of emails, and kind of work out what's our strategy, what we're trying to achieve. And that's very personal, writer on writer. And then talk through my ideas of how to achieve that. And what do they need to do as a writer? Maybe there are things I'm missing in the portfolio. Maybe they need to go away and do some revisions on that calling card script, or write another calling card script, or have some ideas ready if people like the first script. And then there might be a lot of waiting whilst you go out and see where you get to. It really depends what stage their career is at and that kind of thing. But, I think wherever they're at, I suppose it would be talking about what you think the plan is with the writer, and that's very bespoke. I mean, I wouldn't be pushing someone to an area that's not right for them, as long as they know they have realistic steps to get where they want to go. And they're not saying, you know, actually, I'm just going to go straight into making a Hollywood movie, Georgina, you know, forget all the rest. As long as they're being realistic about where they get to where they want to be, there are many ways to get there.
One of the first things after Fat Friends was a weird thing, because it was a bit of hour-long television before I had anything else in my quiver, as it were. So I came to you and said, I think I need to do something where I'm learning on the job. So I asked for Emmerdale, and we've continued to have those strategy meetings throughout our relationship, that we sit down and you're very honest with me and say, I think you should stop doing that because it's not furthering your career anymore. And we talk about that. And sometimes I've gone against your advice and taken things because I loved writing them, and it was fun. And more often than not, you've actually been right. And you seem to have a good sense of, you put things in front of me, but you hang back. You don't tell me what to think about them. But I think we've come to a point in our relationship where I come back to you and go, I'm not sure that's for me, and you think, no, that was what I was hoping you would say. Yeah,
no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a very bespoke process, definitely, and what's right for a particular writer. And also, like you say, as a career goes on, I think I have this thing, and I say this to people, it becomes about what you say no to as much as what you say yes to. At the beginning, it's all let's get those things to say yes to. And then after a while, you have choices to make. Do I want to do this? Do I want to do that? What's the opportunity cost of doing this? What does it mean I can't do? And if I do lots of this kind of thing, what message is that saying to the industry about my career? And we've had lots of those conversations about genre and tone. And, you know, I really like the fact that many of my clients, I feel, slightly keep people on their toes in terms of their CVs and mix it up a bit, whether that's working across media like stage and screen or genres. And, you know, I think there is pigeonholing in the industry. So I think it's really good. If you've got an area that is your thing, you want to do loads of that, that's great. But, you know, it's quite nice to be nimble and kind of keep moving, keep learning.
So here's an interesting question that occurred to me whilst we've been talking. When I started becoming an activist with the Writers Guild, a couple of people said, how does your agent feel about that? There was a concern about whether it would impact my career. And one of the things I said was, well, I'll never know if I'm not getting jobs because I'm an agitator. And because this is a members only discussion, we can have this conversation. How do you feel about activism, political activism from your clients? Is it something that you keep an eye on, or do you think we should fly free and say what we need to say?
I would never say, I don't think I'd say fly free within reason. I think, you know, you could have someone say whatever they like and you just think, oh, hang on a minute. But most of the time, I think it's pretty rare to say to someone, you shouldn't really be saying that. I mean, I think you have to be careful about what you're saying about a production company you're working with. If you're signing a contract with them, there's probably a confidentiality element. And also, I guess I would say to writers, don't bite the hands that feed you, in terms of if you're working with someone who's giving you a lot of work, think about that. But beyond that, my writers, a lot of them are quite political, a lot of them are campaigning quite a lot, whether it's about representation, about gender issues, accessibility in theatres, loads and loads of different things. And I'm really proud of that. And I really like being associated with that. And actually, I think good people in the industry view that positively rather than otherwise. And so many people have said to me about you, Lisa, that they follow you on Twitter. And you know, I think you have a whole fan base from Twitter. So I think as long as people are sensible about it, I think it's a good thing.
I think I'd agree. And I think the rule is, you know, be true to yourself. Don't say anything on social media that you wouldn't say to someone's face, I think is important. And if you are passionate about something, that passion will come through in your work. It's something I say to new writers, which is, I'm really interested in reading your script, but I want to know what got you to the point to write it. The backstory, the origin story is often as interesting as the actual story. And it gives you a clue into who that person is and how best to help them with their writing.
I think that's a very good point. And I think there's something that has changed in the industry is the connection between a writer and their material has become more important than ever. You know, why is it you that's telling this story? Why do you want to hear this story from you? Are you the right person to tell this story? And so, yes, I don't think people should always have to write about directly their own experiences. I mean, if I was a writer, I would find that would mean no one would ever read my scripts for sure. But also an imagination, obviously, and, you know, what is it like to be that person? All of that plays a part. But I think your connection with the material, particularly if it's something that feels a bit first person and from a particular perspective, is very important.
And something that we did a few years ago is I was getting lots of inquiries where people were describing me as warm and northern. Now, I hope I am warm and northern, but it doesn't necessarily mean that that's what I want to write. And I went away and wrote, admittedly, set in the north, and it was quite warm, horror film. And we confounded, I think we confounded a lot of expectations that when that went. We got a really interesting reaction to it. So one of the first things I'd say is you never stop writing spec scripts, and I know I owe you one. I'm due another one because I need to update my portfolio. But also, you know, is that something people should consider, that who their persona is, if they've been around as an experienced writer for a long time, maybe do something a little bit out of the box that gets people looking at them from a different angle.
Definitely. As you know, Lisa, I'm a big fan of nagging my clients to, even really experienced ones, to just keep writing new work, because I think you can use it to show a different angle to your writing, as you did with that amazing northern warm but horror script with a great title that I've just remembered. And I think it just helps. It helps. I don't know, it helps make people see you in a different direction and look at you in a different way. It opens up doors and so on. So I think that's really, really wise. And also, I think if I have a script for someone and I sent it out to people and they kind of want to make some new contacts, it's quite difficult to go back to either new people or the same contacts with something they wrote a few years ago. Whereas if they send me something new, I can just say, oh, you know, would you like to read the new one, script by so-and-so? And, you know, we as agents have lots and lots of general meetings, and, you know, a typical thing we will do is go through my client list and I'll talk about people that say, oh, the people you want to catch up about. So even if they know someone, say, oh, what's so-and-so up to? Is there anything new I can read? I get asked that all the time. So, you know, I think that is not a wasted use of a writer's time. It's a very valuable thing to do.
I also think occasionally, if you're a jobbing writer like me, I write lots of other people's shows. Writing something that is absolutely you, with no producer sat on your shoulder going, we can't afford this, or the actor won't do this, or we can't sell this. You're just writing for yourself. Can sometimes remind yourself why you do writing in the first place. So as you know, for the last couple of years, I've done a bit of theatre with Unsung Collective, but also with Freedom Studios in Bradford, and it absolutely reignited my passion for writing. Conversely, for my telly writing as well, because it reminded me what an impact you can have on an audience. So pushing yourself out your comfort zone, I think, can often be a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. And just, you know, having that joy of writing. I also think writing a script rather than a treatment for yourself. I mean, obviously it's a big investment of time, but, you know, it stamps your authority, your vision on a project in a way that a treatment alone might not do.
So now I'm going to come on to, again, the thing that'll be in our members' minds. What's your assessment of things for newer writers and more experienced writers at the moment? What's it like out there? Is it the Wild West, or is it the same old?
No, I mean, I feel pretty positively about it, actually. There was a time last year when we all went into lockdown, and, you know, generally it was, I think writers, agents, everyone in the industry was quite depressed and nervous and wary. But actually, even during lockdown, I felt it didn't take that long to start improving in terms of, I felt like the film and TV industry didn't take that long to work out their procedures, their protocols for filming. And I know it's been expensive and very hard, and it has had indirect impact on certain things in production and budgets and so on. I'm not saying it's been easy, but I think the fact that at least the cameras got rolling again quite quickly was very reassuring. I think it was hard on areas like children's because they film over the summer. So in terms of when they actually got back to being able to film again, they'd lost a lot of time. So I think that area was more impacted than some others. Theatre, I feel obviously was, had a really, really tough time. Having said that, I feel like I had a lot of things that were due to open and they got postponed, they didn't get cancelled, and I'm very, very grateful for that. I think there's probably an indirect effect on a logjam for other theatre writers. So we won't know how long it takes to get things back up and running again. But, I look after a lot of people who write cross media, and I think, again, it's about being nimble. People who are writing stage plays started doing more TV development and making use of their time where they could. And there's a mass of TV development and production going on generally. I remember a time in the industry when I was starting out and it felt like there was the BBC, maybe Channel 4 were doing a bit, ITV were pretty not doing that much. And now I think of all the opportunities we've got, UK writers working in America, maybe even working in Europe. I think particularly in television, I think there are loads of opportunities. So I don't feel too depressed about it. I think it's just and I think there's also more openness to newer writers than there used to be.
What's your take on something obviously we've campaigned quite hard on at the Guild, access for writers from underrepresented groups, so Black, Asian and minority ethnicity, people with disabilities. Do you think that's improving, and do you think it's improving quickly enough?
I do think it's improving. As an agent, I think my list, I hope, is fairly diverse, because I've always been interested in people who have a range of stories to tell, and I think I've noticed that writers from underrepresented groups get a lot of interest, and people are generally feeling that they've got to balance things out more than they used to. I think the two areas where I feel more work needs to be done is not having schemes you don't follow through on. That's not just about underrepresented writers, that's about everyone though. I think actually just sometimes let's have these great schemes and let's actually make some of them go to the next stage if we can. I don't think it's great for writers starting out or writers from underrepresented groups to have serial experiences of lots of schemes and then not get to the next stage. And I suppose the other area I would say is I don't think it should be people trying to man teams from underrepresented groups. I think we should have more actual voices, actual creation from people from those groups and tell those stories. I think there's still not enough of that happening and still not, oh yeah, we need to have this number of people, this mix in our group. And I just think that's actually, in the long term, not enough and not what we should be doing.
And how do you feel about, do you think there's one of the skills that writers have to develop now is working collectively as more and more writers' room come on stream? Obviously, the Guild have released our guidelines on show running and looking after people within your writers' room to make sure everyone gets a fair crack of the whip. But do you think we're doing it right in the UK, or do you think we've a long way to go?
In terms of how people participate in writers' rooms? Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure there's more work to be done. I mean, you hear some very positive experiences and you hear some, less positive experiences. I mean, I think as agents generally, we all have whether they're in our head or anywhere else, of people, producers that are good to work with, showrunners that are good to work with. And I think those reputations of, I like to say to producers, do you know how useful that reputation is to you? And, give a pat on the back to the producer who makes it a happy experience for people and so on. I'm also interested in some of the conversations I've seen, for example, in the theatre industry about making writer hours more family friendly. And I wonder whether that will start going a little bit more into film and television. I noticed, I can't remember what, it was quite a high profile show in America. They were on social media saying, by the way, I always got home for tea when I made this show. And I think actually it would be nice to see a bit more of that discussion happening.
Yeah, I completely, I mean, this is something I think we're quite passionate about in the Guild. Obviously, it's a few years since we released our women's report, but one of the things was the idea of the leaky pipeline for female writers who might have caring responsibilities. And often, I think a contributory factor to that was that very macho idea that everyone needs to be writing until 4 a.m. and giving up their weekends, and as you know, I've worked on shows that are like that. They're a constant state of chaos. But I'm lucky I don't have children. I don't even have a dog I have to take out and walk. So that gives me the ability to do that. But for someone who does have caring responsibilities, and why the hell shouldn't they have? It's absolutely toxic.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's something that would be nice to see addressed. I mean, in terms of kind of personalities in the room, I think that's an interesting one and more difficult to navigate, you know, but I think it's something everyone's looking at in every environment of workplace, aren't they? Just to make sure there isn't workplace bullying, which could be in a writer's room as much as anywhere else. I mean, obviously, I think, you know, I certainly think the writers I work with are incredible people, but in any kind of intense, stressful space, these things can happen. So I suppose knowing everyone has someone to talk to in that environment, and what do they do if they've got a concern, would be good.
I think being aware of your own role in the writing room. When I was at Emmerdale, obviously there was a monthly conference that I loved. I'd go and do it for free now, which is something you shouldn't say to your agent. But I used to love being in conference, but it was a very aggressive, who's got the loudest voice, who can get themselves heard environment in a very friendly and collegiate way. But looking back at it with my Writers Guild hat on, I realised that wasn't the perfect environment for every writer around that table. I loved the rough and tumble, but that's not true for everyone. And by participating in it and allowing it to happen, maybe I was contributory to that as well. So hindsight is 2020, but thinking about what's the best way that everybody can get their voice heard in that room, because you've put them in a room for a reason. So having them sat in a corner completely quiet is pointless.
Yeah, and especially the newer writers and the people who've got less experience. I mean, I think that's something that, you know, I think people like you as a showrunner and other people I represent, I know that they would see that as part of their job, to almost chair and make sure those people have a chance to speak and be listened to and contribute. So, and I hope that other people, other showrunners and producers working with showrunners, or people, whoever's leading the room, will feel that that's really a responsibility to make voices heard, and, you know, not who shouts the loudest, or, you know, even that person who puts their hand up, because we know from school that, you know, lots of kids who have clever things to say don't put their hands up. You know, obviously as a writer, I would say to my clients, go for it, put your hand up, say something, but, you know, it's not always that easy.
And I would also say that most writers' rooms, for the most part, are safe spaces where, yeah, you might come out with an absolute clunker of an idea, but no one the next day is going to remember that. And often it's a jumping off point for a much better idea. So I find that writers' rooms, you preface a lot of what you say with, look, not this, but something like this, or this is a terrible idea, but I'm going to say it anyway. You should say the terrible idea, because you never know, it might just give you the bouncing off point for something much more exciting down the line.
Yeah, no, I really like that. And sometimes producers have said that to me, that they're trying to create it. You know, I don't have the benefit of being in the room, so I'm always judging from what my clients tell me, what producers tell me. But, you know, I really like the idea that the whole point of a room should be about feeling safe to experiment with ideas and not shout each other down, because you won't get the wacky ideas that then turn into something amazing if you don't let those conversations happen.
Oh, I mean, in the Emmerdale room, I pitched some terrible ideas, but that went on to be either finessed by better writers than me, or we found a way to do it in a much more soapy way. So yeah, definitely always speak up, I think, but also, if you're on the other end of it, create an environment where people feel able to speak.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm going to come on to something very practical now, and then I am looking at your questions in the chat, everybody. I'll get to as many as I possibly can in the last quarter of an hour. But 2 quick questions. If someone has an idea for a TV show and they're near the start of their career, what documents should they produce to sell that idea or that project?
If they've got an idea that they want to take to a producer or take to an agent?
Give this some context. Sometimes I speak to new writers and they say, I've written the entire series. I've got 6 scripts ready to go. My heart sinks a bit because no one's going to read those 6 scripts. Yeah. But would it make sense for them to have a 2-page pitch, the Bible?
I think if you're not completely established, if you're still on your way up, then I think that the pilot script is the king. And that should speak to it for itself. Having said that, you don't want your pilot to have loads and loads of exposition. I've just got a very experienced writer who sent me an amazing calling card, but it's got quite a lot of it's really high concept, and he can't possibly pack it all into a pilot. So he's got an accompanying short series treatment, and I think that's good. I would say in terms of the accompanying stuff, that if you're doing an initial send out, short but sweet, something like a snappy 2-pager, maybe break up your information a bit so it's not like one huge column. Think of the person you're sending it to as a fairly tired TV executive who needs to be woken up, and they're a human being who is reading. And don't give away too much, keep them guessing, keep something back so that you can maybe have a meeting with them. If someone's interested and they ask you to expand on that idea, you can do a Bible, you can do a long series treatment, you can plan. But I don't think that the initial send out a lot of content or a big synopsis with then is a good thing to do. I think they do things that rather differently in America, by the way. They tend to have much bigger Bibles than we do here. But over here, yeah, sure.
And so here's a thorny question for a guild session. You've got some interest from a producer, you've put that really snappy 2-pager in front of them and they've woken up to it, and they start asking you to do a little bit more. They want you to do the Bible, maybe some character breakdowns, maybe the script. How much of that work should you do for free?
If you've got a producer who's sort of slightly interested, I think if you think, actually, no, this is a good idea, I do think I need to expand on this. I think this will get me other interests anyway, and I'd like to do that. And I'm fairly new, so, maybe. I would think, okay. I think if they're giving you notes that you don't quite agree with, that it's not your vision for the project, I'd say no. If somebody asks you to do some work and you're not being paid, if you think it's for the best, if it makes the project better, if you think it's something you might want to do it yourself anyway, do it for yourself. I think that's very different from doing work on spec for someone else who should be paying you.
And here's a sort of protocol question that I think even as established writers still struggle with. It's a buyer's market out there. There's lots of ideas. If something has been on someone's desk and they've said they were interested in it to start off with, but you haven't heard anything for a little while, is it acceptable to send it out to a couple of other people and see if they're interested? There's no contract in play yet. They just said they were interested.
I suppose, I don't know whether there's a hard and fast rule to that. I suppose it depends how interested they are. I think when you're starting out and you've got a new idea, I don't think anyone would expect you to send something out exclusively anyway. If you feel you have a producer said they're interested and you've kind of engaged in a conversation with them, then I would probably, and you feel like there's a little bit of momentum and why haven't they come back, I'd probably just give them a nudge and just say, just checking, are you still interested? And maybe at some point even quite understand and we'll move on, but I just to know where I am, I think that's fair enough.
Great stuff. Right, I'm going to come on to, I'll go do as many of other people's questions as I can. So I'm not sure what we've got in here, so I'll just go for it. I'll start with this one. what would you advise someone who is producing a weekly comedy video on a YouTube channel with a few short comedies that have won awards, and they're about to finish their calling card feature script? Is it best that they wait until the script is fully complete before making contact with the wider industry and agents, or should they just go for it at this point?
Are the comedy videos short form, kind of like?
So sort of short comedies and
yeah, well, I think if they're working on the comedy screenplay, I'd say to play the long game, finish the comedy script, and then you've got your portfolio, you've got your comedy script, you've got your online comedies as well. Because I think sometimes there's a lot of discussion about short form. I know that I can never pronounce it, Quibbly or Quibi didn't quite take off, and people thought this was going to be a big area to go. But at the moment, commercially, for say an agent, we don't do that much work in the short form. It's probably more about potential. So I think having something longer would be really helpful.
Great stuff. Moving on to this question. What's your opinion on the role of social media in building a profile and networking?
I think it's a very personal thing for the writer, really. I mean, as I've said, for Lisa, she's got a load of followers on Twitter and it's been a really kind of positive thing. I think people have got to know you through Twitter. But I also have clients who just don't love social media, and that's fine, if that's not their thing. So yeah, I think it can be really valuable, but I don't think it's essential if it's not right for you. And also you have some people who like Instagram and some people like Twitter, and some people find all the comments and they find things like Twitter quite aggressive. And I think again, you don't have to do social media, and if you do social media, choose the one that doesn't stress you out, fits your voice, fits what you're saying.
I think that's fantastic advice, because I think there is we're beginning to have this significant mental health impact if social media begins to dominate your life. And I think early doors, I think you had to set up a Twitter account, because I got angry over something that had been said to me about my Twitter back in the day. It feels like a very long time ago now. So I had teething trouble. I think I'm much more measured about what I say on Twitter and Facebook. As far as I'm concerned, Facebook's, for my mum and my aunties, and we talk to each other on there. But I would advise writers to just don't tweet in anger too often. Be professional. If it is your professional account, then bear that in mind, because I don't think I've ever got myself into serious trouble, but I think I was a bit unguarded when Twitter first came along, because you forget that you are broadcasting, not chatting to your friends.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Just remember that everyone, that person you're working with, or maybe someone who knows that person you're working with, will read your tweet. Yeah.
And I will share this, famously, a former commissioner at a big channel did used to look for their name popping up on Twitter and Facebook, and would give you chills down the back of your spine as you saw you got a private message from them because they'd read what you'd said about them. So those things are monitored, rightly or wrongly, so bear that in mind.
Yeah, definitely. Think before you tweet.
Absolutely. I think this will probably be our last question. We've seen in the last few years an explosion of podcasting, an alternative medium, particularly to creative dramatic writers outside of the traditional systems like the BBC. Why do you think that the majority of UK writing agents haven't yet looked deep into this pool of creatives? Maybe they have. And this is quite a long question, so I'm just looking through it. Basically, is this an area that you are thinking of expanding into? Do you think it's the future? Is podcasting going to be a significant part of our writing world over the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, I have people who are active in podcasts. I've got a comedy duo who've been developing comedy podcasts and working with kind of comedy talent to do a sort of narrative entertainment type hybrid. And also the line between radio and podcasts are really blurring. As you know, if you do a radio show, it's then repeated as a podcast. So when I had a couple of writers who did a thriller on Radio 4 last year. It actually won Best Fiction Podcast, but it was actually a Radio 4 show. So the lines are blurring. I think people think that podcast sounds a bit more sexy than radio, though, and it's making people sit up and listen. I would say I can't imagine quite yet taking on someone who was just doing podcasts, because there isn't that much of a, for me as an agent, I need to kind of get them contracts, I need to get them work, and a lot of it is people doing it themselves. And you do have people like Audible in the market as well, but you know that the deals are often very, very small for people. So I think at the moment writers and agents both would be piecing a writer's income and work together from other places as well. I really hope that will change, and obviously there's a model where, you know, a writer can create something and make some percentage from advertising revenue, but I think it's a really exciting area, but one that needs to build a little bit to become a viable source of big income, you know, a big part of a writer's, because, you know, you need to earn money, you need to eat, and I don't think most people won't be doing that from podcasts at the moment.
It's worth saying that the reason that the Writers Guild Craft Committee changed its name from the Radio Committee to the Audio Committee this year is because we're across podcasting, and I think your assessment's absolutely right. At the moment, there's not a lot of money to be made from it, but it can be a really good showcase for new writers. But I think it's worth keeping an eye on, because I think the future, and I think you're right that also, you know, TV and film producers are sort of circling that content, because I think the thing I always want to remind people is we're the ones with the idea. The producers don't have the ideas, and so they're looking at those ideas as potential to expand to other medium, which I think makes it really exciting. There's some really fantastic podcasts out there at the moment, which are fresh and innovative, and that can't have escaped the notice of the old school producers.
Yeah, I think it's also about, you know, I think podcast works well for people who want to do their own thing. I've got a lovely client, James Carey, who has got his Sitcom Geeks podcast, and you know, that's something he does himself, and it's a way of giving people advice about writing comedy, and you know, he's got a lot of initiative, and I think it's not something that is his writing bread and butter, but it's something that kind of complements what he's doing, and I think a lot of people do this in a kind of promotional way. I look after film TV rights to a book author called Liz Pichon, who writes the Tom Gates books, and you know, she's been doing a really fun podcast interviewing lots of people in the kids industry, for example, and you know, I think doing it as something that's kind of complementary and that you have control of is actually a really nice way to do podcasting at the moment as well. And it, you know, maybe it's an indirect thing for your career, but you know, not necessarily a bad one to do at all if it's right for you.
Absolutely. Fantastic. I think that's just about it. Thank you so much, Georgina. Are there any final words of wisdom you want to put out to the writing community?
Just keep going. It's hard work, but you know, if you're brilliant and you keep working hard, hopefully you'll get there. And there's lots of advice that's available. I was going to say on my website as well, there is also a new writer's guide, which has got some resources that you can contact. There are other things you can think about, like BBC Writers' Room, regional theatres. So, you know, anything like that, just go for it and build things and take things in hand as much as you can.
Fantastic. Thanks, Georgina. I'll hand back to Nadine now, who'll sign off.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you both so much. There's really great comments in the chat, so thank you for giving up your time for other writers. Yeah. So as I said at the start, this is going to be a series. So the next one is going to be Sean Gascoigne from United Agents on the 18th of November. So keep an eye out and we'll send you an email for that. Thanks everyone, and see you soon.
Bye everybody.